So, in the last chapter of our social studies books, we talked about the first colonies and the people who came to the Americas and met the Native Americans. And we talked about how those people were here primarily for the money and to make wealth out of things that they could get in the Americas. But the next two groups that we're going to talk about, the Puritans and the Pilgrims, they had a different purpose. They were able to better govern themselves, and they came because they wanted religious freedom and they strove for the glory of God. Their love for God and freedom came from an understanding of the Bible and from their English heritage. There was a lack of freedom in England at this time, even though the English were a freedom-loving people. James I was still King of England, and he said that he was head of the church as well as the head of the government. Because the king forced everyone to attend his church, the Church of England, the English people were not free to worship as many thought they should. Two of those groups were the Pilgrims and the Puritans. They are very similar, but not really the same. When you start looking at their purposes and their beliefs, there are some very distinct differences between the two groups. They were both groups that loved God, but the Puritans wanted to stay with the church. They just wanted to clean things up that they felt were wrong with it. They wanted to purify it or clean it, which is how they got the name Puritans. The Pilgrims were also called separatists. They wanted to leave the Church of England and start a new church. They didn't believe that you could clean up what was wrong with it. The Pilgrims were known as separatists because they believed the church was not being true to the Bible, and they wanted to leave to start a new one. Because the separatists wanted to preach and do what the Bible really teaches, these brave people held secret meetings to study the Bible. When the king heard of these meetings, he sent men to spy on the separatists. When the separatists were caught, they were often put in jail for their beliefs. They were persecuted throughout England for whatever they believed because they were not following the Church of England. So they left and they went to Holland, north of England, to find religious freedom, which they did, but the people in Holland accepted all religions, and the Pilgrims were afraid that the other people around them were going to make their children a bad influence to their children. And so they decided they would go to America instead and start over. The Pilgrims did come over on the Mayflower, and before they left that Mayflower to go out on the land, they wrote the Mayflower Compact before leaving. There are many things that they wrote in the Mayflower Compact that you will find in the Declaration of Independence also. It was a very important document in the history of our country because it was the first written government that allowed the people to govern themselves. The Pilgrims, they settled in Plymouth. The Puritans, on the other hand, they lived in England, and they thought that the Church of England had become corrupt, but they thought that they could clean up the things that were wrong with it. They wanted a more pure form of worship, and they wanted to change the church, not leave it. In 1630, 11 ships came from England with the Puritans to the Massachusetts Bay Colony. The Puritans established the city of Boston. The Puritans believed strongly that everyone should have a good education. The Puritans are today for their trust in God, their willingness to work hard, their high standards, and their strict discipline. One of their famous leaders was the governor, John Winthrop. He was their second governor, and he was elected 12 times. Even the Indians admired the governor, John Winthrop, because they said he was a truthful man.